Hey y'all, this is Jeff, dialoguedoctor.com. And today I'm going to do something a little bit different. I don't have a guest on the episode today. It's just me. And I am going to share with you something that I have come up with in the last couple months that I think is going to help get your mind around dialogue in a new way. We'll try to keep this episode short because I think it's a lot more fun when there's more people on here than just me. But since it's just me, we're going to try to keep it tight. Um, Good luck with that. Anyway, so I started running this course back in November, and the reason I ran the course was because I was full of book clients. I couldn't take any more clients. I had too much scheduled already. Working a full-time job, having 5 kids that are all home with me in COVID. Welcome to our COVID classroom. And I just couldn't manage any more clients. So I was like, you know what, though, I can do a course, and hopefully by the end of the course, these people that want to work with me to do their books, they will have all the tools they need to do things themselves, and they won't need me to edit for them. They can just take the course with me, and by the time we're done editing a book together, they will be able to edit dialogue like I edit dialogue, and understand and feel dialogue like I understand and feel dialogue. So that was my prime objective for the course. And I just got to say up front, I don't know if I've said this. I know I haven't said this on a YouTube video yet, but I don't know if I've said this in the podcast or not. My goal with all of this is to provide tools for writers that you can learn and use yourself. Right. Because if you're dependent on me to edit your stuff or look at your stuff, I'm just one dude. And there's going to be a line, and I have my own preferences and my own hangups and my own weird stuff. So like my goal, rather than you be dependent on my interpretation and my, how I feel about things, I would rather you be able to do your own thing and edit your own work. So if I can give you some tools that help you understand dialogue in a new way, that's what I want to do. So that was my goal for the course, was to give a bunch of people tools that they can help. It's been fantastic. I've loved it all along. I've made some great friends. We've had a really good time. It's been fun. I had a secondary goal of the course. The secondary goal was, I have all these ideas about dialogue and all these things that I do and that I see really fantastic writers do, and I just needed to pin them down. I needed to create some systems that I can pass on to other writers. And I know just from my experience that I learn best when I teach. Um, when I'm forced to sit down and teach something to someone else, that's what really helps me refine it. So I went into the course also hoping to teach, and out of that course came an illustration about dialogue that I think is super helpful. And I call it the dialogue daisy. I call it the dialogue daisy for 2 reasons. I'm going to bring a little slideshow up here. So give me a second to share my screen. I'm really bad at this tech stuff. Excuse me. So no editing, cough stays in. I don't know how to edit video. I'm old. I'm an old man. I don't know how to do these things. I ain't some cute YouTuber. I'm using YouTube because this is the only platform available to me. I don't know how to edit stuff. All right. So you can see my daisy here. I call it the dialogue daisy, 1, because of the illustration, and 2, because I like the way the Doc Holliday uses the word daisy in the movie Tombstone. You're a daisy if you do. You're no daisy. You're no daisy at all. And as I was researching the word daisy, because I wanted to know what it meant, I found out that in the late 1800s, the word daisy meant like magnificent or the best. And I was like, oh, this is perfect. We got the daisy illustration of the like flower, and then we've also got the word meaning the best. So if I say the daisy dialogue method, it means the absolute best dialogue method, and it's got a pretty flower with it. So it's really nice. So let's go through the daisy. So this is my daisy, and if you're listening, I'm going to describe it to you so that you don't have to be like, what is he talking about? And I also want to say that if you go to dialoguedoctor.com and subscribe to my newsletter, I send out a newsletter every Tuesday morning, and it's always like an addition to what I'm doing in the podcast. So or in this case, the YouTube video. So whatever you see in the YouTube video or the podcast, if you're like, oh my gosh, I want to know more about that, get signed up to the free newsletter because I send out the newsletter Tuesday morning, and it's kind of like a little bonus to what I do. And this week in the newsletter, I'm going to send everybody a copy of their own Dialogue Daisy diagram, so they can take the Dialogue Daisy and put it on their wall. And as they think about their characters, they can remember. This also goes in combination with the character wheel chart that I use, that I've already talked about a lot on YouTube and on the podcast. You can find episodes of the character wheel where we talk about it. And I got one coming up where we're going to analyze some movies with a character wheel. All that to say, you can find the character wheel stuff. That's also on the website, dialoguedoctor.com. And the Dialogue Daisy lines up with the character wheel and helps explain why the character wheel is laid out like it is. So let's talk about the Dialogue Daisy. We have this beautiful daisy, and you'll see that above the ground, there's the stem, and then the center of the daisy, and then the petals around the daisy. I don't know what these things are scientifically called. I did take bio in college. At one point, I knew this stuff. I don't know it now. So we're going to call it the stem. We're going to call it the little yellow centerpiece, and then the white petals around it. But then underground, you have the roots, right? And when we think about a character voice, we want to take the whole daisy into consideration. Now, let's start from the bottom up. What are the roots? So the roots make up all the stuff that is the foundation of your character voice. Your character's genetics, where they're from, where they were born, the culture that they live in, the character backstory, all that stuff, right? Like, so, excuse me, let's say that your character was born in let's say your character was born in a rough neighborhood. Excuse me. Let's say your character was born in a rough neighborhood in Baltimore City. Your character never knew her dad. Your character has grown up and went to school and got a college education and is now working as an attorney for an all-male firm. All of that are in the roots. All that's in the foundation. Now, I know that might be shocking to some of you, because I know when we start building characters, this is where we always start. We start with their backstory. Who were their parents? What was their childhood like? Let's get behind their eyes. And then we write this big portfolio, right? We have a chart with like all this stuff of their history and what they went through, and, you know, what their race is and how that compares to the race of the other characters, and how that, and then we take that portfolio of this large background on the character and we go, this is the character voice. But that is not the character voice. Excuse me. I'm going to pause. I'm going to stop the share, and I'm going to pause the video, and I'm going to get a drink and come back so I stop coughing in the mic, because it's gross. Nobody likes that. I'm back. I'm sorry about that. I am not sick, even though this is a coughing pandemic. I'm not sick. I just didn't had a tickle in my throat that I needed to go get rid of. Back to the daisy. So, or the daisy's this way. I don't know which way YouTube makes the daisy. The daisy is one of these two ways, but it's all about you. Sorry, that was super cheesy. I can't help it. This is what happens when you put me alone on a YouTube video or a podcast by myself. I just talk to myself. This is what I do, and it's terrible. This is what you're seeing is a raw expression of what's happening in my mind all the time. And I'm scared. I know you're scared too, but I'm scared. Sorry. What I was saying was, a lot of times as writers, what we do is we build this giant backstory for the character, and we put it in this chart, and we say, we have the character voice, we're done. And then we're confused when all of our characters, even though they have different backstories, all come out sounding the same. Now, last week we talked about gender mapping. This is where that gender mapping goes, right? Gender mapping comes into these roots. It's part of the character's foundation and who they are. So the roots of the daisy lead into the stem, and the stem is the character's personality. So our personality, our character's personality, is the things that the expression of the character's background. Let me say that again, because I stumbled over it. The character's personality is the expression of the character's background. So, character we defined before, right? Grew up in the inner city, didn't know her father, had this really rough life, had to fight through it to get her education and become a lawyer, and she takes a job in a mostly male firm. Maybe all that time and struggle caused her to be a character that puts her head down and does the work and is serious and is shy and really struggles to connect with people. The shy, serious, struggles to connect with people, that's her personality. Or just maybe, that character had to learn how to dominate a room and had to learn how to keep the focus on her and had to learn how to fight and to struggle and to strive so that she became this kind of charismatic person, right? Who hides who she is and hides her inner self. I'm thinking specifically of a character on a show right now whose name I can't remember. It's on Netflix. Anyway, uh, so maybe that's how the character's personality is shaped. But the key is there's this roots, this foundation, and the personality is an expression. The stem is an expression of that foundation. This is where you're going to put things like if you're into the Enneagram and you're into giving your characters Enneagram numbers, those Enneagram numbers are the character's personality, right? So, for example, in the Enneagram, I'm a 6, which means I'm scared of everything, terrified. Everything's scary. But I'm also a strategist. I'm also thinking about things, and I'm crazy super loyal. My friends are my friends forever, but I struggle to trust because I'm afraid of everything, right? Like, so that's an Enneagram 6, right? And that's my stem. That's the personality. Or uh, if you go the Myers-Briggs, I'm an INFJ, right? So the stem for me would be that INFJ personality. Or if you want to go the like strengths finder, right? Like my 5 strengths are strategic, individualization, context, restorative, achiever. Again, that's my personality. That's the expression of my past and my genetics and all those roots that like took deep root and built the foundation of this stem of who I am. Here's the key. That's still not your character's voice. Still not your character's voice, right? So we've got backstory, foundation, genetics, all that stuff. Those are the roots, not your character's voice. The stem is the personality that supports your character's voice and that your character's voice blossoms out of, but the personality is not your character's voice, right? Super important to remember. Let's go to the next part. So finally, we get your character's voice in that middle of that blossom, the baseline expression of your character's voice. So if I say that your character is shy, let's go back to our 2 examples. If I say that your character is shy, and that your character puts her nose down and goes hard at work, but struggles to relate with people, some ways we might describe your character's voice is uses full words, has a deep inner thought life, but keeps other things to herself, guarded, protective, right? Um, yeah, so those would be like the baseline expression of your character's voice. And what do I mean by baseline? By baseline, so here's the deal. You're rarely going to write the baseline voice. It's just true. Baseline would be like in normal circumstances under normal emotions. Well, what in the world is normal circumstances? Who knows, right? But in normal circumstances under normal emotions, we get the baseline voice. Now, here's the thing. We have to create the baseline so we can modulate into different emotional states or circumstances, right? But we need that baseline voice to get the kind of like, here is the voice that we're modulating from. And sometimes you will write it, right? Like if you're in a normal circumstance with a normal emotional set, kind of a neutral emotional set, you'll write that baseline voice. So maybe you write the baseline voice when my character is in a meeting, right? In the meeting, this is the circumstances she's used to. She's in a board meeting with a bunch of lawyers. Circumstances she's used to, she's comfortable. This is her normal voice. She doesn't use a lot of words, right? She's guarded, she's protective, she's sparing with what she shares, even though she may have a rich inner thought life. Now, if the personality is the other side, right? Because we said personality could be two, where she's charismatic and she likes to dominate the room, and she's learned that it's important for her to fight for her way to the top. If she doesn't fight for attention, she's never going to get it. Well, the baseline voice for that character is going to be different, right? She's going to tell stories. She's going to be captivating in what she says. She's going to ask questions in order to control the conversation, right? She's going to draw conclusions. She's going to try to bring people to her side in debate, right? Because she wants everyone eyes focused on her, right? So that's you see how the personality blossoms into the voice, but the personality is not the voice. The voice are the words and the characteristics and the notes about how we write that we make to ourselves that make up that blossom. And when I say the notes about how we write are like useful words versus uses questions to control the conversation, right? Like, so we're getting that blossom of the baseline voice. So, recap: roots are the backstory of your character, the genetics of your character, where your character's from, your character's gender map, all that stuff is the roots. The stem is the personality, right? The stem grows out of the roots. It's an expression of the roots. It's not your character voice, though. Your character voice blossoms from the personality and starts at that centerpiece so that we can get a good feel for how the voice is. Then once we get past that centerpiece, we're going to modulate the voice based on emotional state or circumstances. So let me give examples of emotional state first. Think about how you talk. Imagine your own voice, right? Imagine how you talk to the barista at your favorite coffee place, right? You put your order, maybe, if your personality is somebody who is naturally nice. I'm from the South, y'all. Right? Like, I grew up in the South. My parents are from the South. I can turn my accent on and off because I've been all over the place, except when I get nervous and it comes out, or when I get really tired. Like when we're in a film shoot and we're doing a ton of takes, my team at my day job always makes fun of me because I have to call out one of my jobs in a film shoot sometimes is to call up a take number. And if it's been a long day and it's at the end of the day, I hit my sevens and my nines just really hard. So I'll be like, take number 7, and everybody laughs at me. Anyway, sorry. So, growing up in the South, part of my personality is being nice. So I'm always nice to baristas. I like to say yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am, and yes, sir, and no, sir, because my mom had taught me that that's how good boys behave, which understanding the diversity of gender actually makes this really hard. Karen from the last podcast and I have talked a lot about this. About my deep desire to put somebody in a male or female bucket so that I might be polite to them. So my politeness, my deep desire to be polite, actually ruining my respecting who they are. Anyway, that's a mess. All that to say, um, talking to your barista, right? Like maybe you're nice. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. You're a little more formal. If you're like me, you're kind. You're asking for things from them. That may be one emotional state, right? Like talking to the barista. Now, my bet is you sound differently when you're talking to your best friend on the phone than you do when you're talking to a barista at a store, right? When you're talking to your best friend on the phone in privacy, you're comfortable, right? You aren't as guarded. Whatever mask you're wearing starts to come down and you can be yourself. We've got vulnerability. We've got intimacy with our best friends, with the people that really know us. And when we're vulnerable, our voice changes. Now, let's say you go to the barista, you then talk to your best friend on the phone and have this vulnerable conversation, and you then come home and you get in a fight. You get in a fight with one of your kids. And when you're in a fight with one of your kids, you're exasperated, right? You're frustrated, you're irritated, and your voice is different right? Your voice isn't going to sound the same as it sounds when you're vulnerable or when you're connecting with somebody. It's not going to sound the same as when you're talking to a barista. The niceness and the kindness is going to disappear a little bit, and you're going to have something else dig into that frustration and angst with your kids. So we've got these emotional states that we're in. And we know from our own example that as we move, as our personal voices move into these emotional states, we can feel and hear our voices change. That's just part of who we are, because our voice is the primary communicator of what's in our mind and what's in our soul, right? Like our voice communicates the emotional state that we're in. And when I say voice, I mean body language, I mean expressions on our face, and I mean what's coming out of our mouth. Our character voice is the conveyor of emotion. So, moving into these emotional states, if we can take a character that we're writing and we can modulate their voice depending on the emotional state that they're in. If we can move from pedal to pedal to pedal, we engage the reader in the emotions we're writing. Say that again. When we write a character, if we can modulate the emotional state of our character's voice, we will engage a reader into our character in a deep and emotional way. Our reader will connect with our character emotionally. And that's what we want, right? Why do people read to the end of a book? Sure, sometimes it's the plot. The plot can get people to read to an end of a book. But plots can get repetitive, especially if you're writing genre literature, right? Like if you're writing romance novels, there's a pretty strict plot, right? Like take Hallmark movies, for example. There's a joke on the internet that you can guess to the minute of what things are going to happen in a Hallmark movie, right? Like the plot can only take us so far. What really connects us deeply to a book, to a work of art, is that we feel what the character's feeling. We empathize and connect with the character. And we're on this journey with the character because we connect with the character's emotion, right? Like, what is it about Lord of the Rings where dwarfs are singing and hobbits are being weird and talking about secondsies and thirdsies dinner times and orcs are scary? What is it that keeps us connected to that book? It's because J.R.R. Tolkien connected us to the emotions of those characters, right? We feel it when Sam and Frodo are lost in Mordor. And we connect to that because we all want our life to be a mission. And we all know that mission's hard and that we all have moments when we want to give up, when the burden is too heavy to carry. And in those moments when we read Frodo's words, because of how Tolkien modulates Frodo's voice, we embrace Frodo on a deep level and just totally buy into him, right? Like, so this is what we need to be doing with our characters. We need to have a baseline voice and modulate. Now, why do I say we need to have a baseline voice and modulate to each pedal, right? Because that baseline voice, that center of that blossom, that's our core. And as we modulate into different pedals, it's not that the voice changes. It's that parts of that baseline become expressed and parts of that baseline become muted. So let's go back to our shy character. We said our shy character is using a few words. She's protective, she's guarded, but she's not afraid to work, right? Like, and she's not afraid to say what she thinks, and she has this deep inner thought life. But she keeps the inner thought life on the inside in her baseline. When she modulates into talking to her barista, right? We're going to focus on giving her few words. We're going to focus on her being protective and guarded because it's just a normal circumstance. She's talking to a stranger. She doesn't know that stranger, right? We're not going to accentuate her inner thought life because she's just talking to a barista. Why does she need it? Now, when she's on the phone with her best friend, we're still going to keep her in that like few words space, but those words are going to be more important. And that rich inner thought life is going to start to come out and she's going to share how she's feeling. And when our reader reads how she's feeling, they're going to go, oh, yeah. because they love the vulnerability she's expressing. And because she's being vulnerable, they can be vulnerable too, right? And they can let down their guard as well. So, but then when we move into her fight, her anger mode, inner thoughts go away because she's protective and guarded. And that protectiveness and guardedness is going to come out and be strong. And we're going to accentuate the mask of her voice in that angry, frustrated flower, in the debate fight flower, right? We're going to move her language to be more professional, still few words. She's never a person of a lot of words, still few words. Protectiveness of those words, guarding those inner thoughts, not sharing what she thinks, right? So you can see how, like, I'm not changing her voice from the bass line to the pedals. All I'm doing is expressing part of it and muting another part, right? Expressing the part that makes sense and muting the other part, because the stem don't change. All the pedals are connected to the same personality. So we don't want a schizophrenic character who's like in one scene verbose and happy and laughing and like everything's great, life of the party, and then another scene incredibly shy and muted and scared, right? Like that's going to freak out our reader because they're going to be like, I can't get a handle on this character. The character's all over the map, right? But if we want our reader to fall in love with our character, our reader is going to be able to relate emotionally. They're going to understand the character's personality, and they're going to feel the changes in the character's emotional state by how we modulate that character voice. Okay, so here's the beauty of this. If we think of character voice in this way, right, we can create in our books this beautiful garden of voices, right? Imagine this beautiful garden of different colored daisies, just this bouquet of characters, bright, beautiful colors of characters for our reader to relate to. And here's the thing, here's how it works, right? Like we line up the baseline voice and then we modulate them differently. So think about a scene where we have our shy character and our charismatic character in the same scene, right? And let's do our charismatic character real quick, right? Like we said that they control the conversation. They do so by asking questions. They like to be the center of attention. So they're participating. They're drawing things back into themselves all the time. Now, when they're talking to their barista, we're going to mute the need to ask questions to control the conversation, but maybe they're telling stories to their barista. Maybe they're complimenting something about their barista because they want to draw their barista's attention to themselves, right? Now, when they're in a serious state of vulnerability, they're going to let down that need to be the center of attention. And maybe that asking questions in a moment of vulnerability is less about controlling the conversation and more about connecting to the person that they're talking to. But in fight mode, oh, we're on, and we're going to exaggerate that need to control the conversation. And it's going to become an interrogation, not just a question asking time for exploratory, right? Like, so we're going to emphasize that need to ask questions, but we're going to make those questions into an interrogation where like it's all about control and it's all about getting the answer she wants and driving to that conclusion that she wants. So let's say we put both of those ladies in a courtroom together. We've got the shy character who doesn't use a lot of words, who's guarded and protective and doesn't say what she wants to say. And when we move into that courtroom scene where she's in a heated debate, her debate is going to be short, quick, definitive statements that make her case and share nothing of her strategy or her inner thoughts. On the other side, our charismatic attorney, right, when we get into that case, she is going to make a show, ask big questions, right? Pursue lines of thought through question, dazzle a little bit, right? Because she wants the attention on her. And now we have this amazing courtroom scene with these two very different lawyers who sound so different to our reader, right? And it creates this really beautiful garden of different flowers that our reader can enjoy. Sometimes I think of it too as like painting on a canvas, and that the characters are each different colors. So let's say that first more muted character is a deep blue, and that second character is a really vibrant pink, right? We can use those two colors to paint this amazing canvas, right? Like, especially if we add even more colors to the palette. And then we can put all those colors to create a more dynamic scene. Whereas if all of our characters are just different versions of blue, then we really just get a blue painting, right? Like, and it might be a really fantastic blue painting, but it's still not very exciting. It's all just blue, right? But if we have this vibrant palette of colors, we can paint this super vibrant picture that can super engage our reader. So all that to say, we want all our characters to sound different. The way we do that is by focusing on the blossom of their personality and a voice, and how that blossom changes to modulate into the different petals of the voice. The dialogue daisy, because you're a daisy if you do, to quote Doc Holliday. Anyway, now I'm rambling again. This is so dangerous. Being on a podcast by myself, super dangerous. So, oh no. Okay, we're losing the thread. Danger, danger. Okay, all that to say, we want vibrant colors, different sounding characters. Now, here's the trick. Starting at the foundation, at the character's backstory and like history and gender map, all that's fun and it's great, and it can really help you think through the personality, and really get, when you get to the blossom, that center piece of the voice, it can really help. But it doesn't need to be that way. You don't have to start with the foundation. You can start with stem and go straight to the blossom. Heck, you can start with the blossom and go to the modulation. A lot of times for side characters, I don't have a backstory. I don't have even a personality in mind. I just go ahead and go and write in that middle blossom what the voice is and how it modulates, right? And here's another thing. Now that we're being strategic about our voices and we're designing our voices before we get into writing, we can build voices that contrast and complement each other, right? We can plant our garden strategically. And I've talked about that on other podcasts, and I'll keep talking about it. This idea that partner ally characters and antagonist protagonist characters need to complement and contrast each other in different ways. So we'll get, but now you kind of get an inkling of what I'm talking about when I say that, is that like we want our garden to have these different beautiful flowers in that. All right. That's all I got for this week. Is the dialogue daisy, roots, stem, blossom, and petals, as the character's backstory, the character's personality, the baseline voice, and then how we modulate it based on different emotions. Oh, I didn't do different circumstances. So you can also modulate based on different circumstances. This happens a lot in like action centered genres like sci-fi. So a lot of times it's not about the emotional state of the character. It's about the scene the character's in. Although I would argue that the situation the character's in brings about a different emotional state, but a lot of times it's easier to track it in a scene. So like, you might have like the character in intense action as one of the petals, and then the character in between action during down times, and then the character, in around friends where they feel comfortable and safe, right? Like, so these different circumstances are going to change the voice. So if it's hard to pinpoint the emotional state, think about the circumstance you're going to have them in, and then try to, figure out those circumstances. How many petals can a daisy have? Can it only have 4 petals? Can it have 3 petals? Can it have 2 petals? Can it have 9 petals? It can have as many petals as you want to figure out. I always recommend start with your baseline and then get the 2 modulations you're going to need, right? When you think through the book you're writing or the scene you're writing, you think like, okay, my character is going to experience these things. Even if you're not a plotter, that like if you're writing a romance, there's going to be an intimacy scene. How does your character's voice modulate to a place of intimacy, right? There's probably going to be an uncomfortable entanglement. How does your character's voice modulate when the character's uncomfortable, right? Like, so just think about, get a general, if you're not a plotter and you can't like lay out the scenes to know the different emotional states you need, just think in general, like what emotional states am I going to need, and just brainstorm a little bit. And that's what that character wheel's for. I'm not going to get into the character wheel today because I do it in other episodes and other podcasts. Head over to dialoguedoctor.com. There's a free version there. You can just grab it and look at it. But that's what that character wheel's for, is to help you modulate voices. So that to say, when I start off a book with a client, when I start off with a book, I say, okay, let's get like the baseline voice and then maybe 2 scenes down. I will do that for the protagonist, the main ally or 2, and the antagonist, right? Like I'll get those. So the characters you're going to hear from the most, that's who you want to do this for. Characters that are actually going to track through the book. If you've got a side character that's going to appear in like 1 or 2 scenes, you don't need to modulate their voice, right? Like they're just a side character. They're just there to like, they're just a pop of color on your palette, right? Like you don't need to go to all that work. Just get their baseline down, get their personality, their baseline. You're good to go, right? Because I promise you can get lost in this. You can do this for, you can dream up characters for hours, but that doesn't put words on the page. So the goal is for this to help you get words on the page faster. So I say, right, spend an hour getting your protagonist and antagonist and an ally together, and then go to work and write a scene. And then as you write the scene, I actually keep my character wheel going through the whole book that I'm writing. So as I'm writing a book, I develop the character voices using my character wheel chart. I might come across another scene where like, oh, I didn't plan for this emotional state or for this circumstance. I didn't realize that my character was going to drunk in a bar. What do they sound like when they're drunk? Oh, I got to go to their baseline voice and figure out what's muted and expressed. And then I'll just go to my character wheel chart and I'll take like 10 minutes to figure out what that new pedal looks like. All right. So I hope this is helpful. Leave a comment if it is, or if you have any questions, leave a comment. Again, my goal is to give you tools that you can use and enjoy. If you want your own copy of the Dialogue Daisy, just to think about and look at on your own, you can go to the website dialoguedoctor.com, sign up for the newsletter. It'll come out on Tuesday. There'll be a copy there. All right. And if you watch this video late, not the week it comes out, and you're like, oh, I wanted a copy and I signed up for the newsletter, but just like 10 newsletters down, and he's not even in this newsletter anymore, so I don't have a copy, just email me. Just shoot me an email. And if you sign up for the newsletter, you get my email. So just shoot me an email and I'll email you a copy of the diagram. All right, that's it for this week, gang. Again, hope this was helpful. I try to keep it shorter. I do the best I can. I can't handle what happens in my brain. Yeah, and I will see you next week.